The starship Eclipse drifted silently through the void of space, its hull glinting faintly under the light of a distant sun. On board, a lone human named Dr. Elias Carter worked tirelessly in the ship's laboratory. He was a xenobiologist tasked with studying alien ecosystems and life forms. The Eclipse was his home, his workplace, and his prison. For the past 6 months, he had been alone, the sole survivor of a catastrophic accident that had claimed the lives of his crewmates. The ship's AI, a cold and logical entity named Aegis, kept him company, but it was no substitute for human interaction. Elias had grown accustomed to the solitude, but his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. On a routine survey mission to a remote, uncharted planet, Elias detected an unusual energy signature. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a sign of intelligent life. The planet, designated as X-427, was a barren wasteland with a thin atmosphere and jagged, rocky terrain. It was an unlikely place for life to thrive, but Elias was intrigued. He suited up and descended to the surface in a small shuttle, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he explored the desolate landscape, he stumbled upon a crashed alien vessel. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek, organic, and covered in a shimmering, iridescent material that seemed to shift colors as he approached. The ship was badly damaged, but it was clear that it had been there for some time. Elias cautiously entered the wreckage, his scanner in hand. Inside, he found signs of a struggle. The walls were scorched, and the air was thick with the scent of burnt metal and something else, something alien. As he ventured deeper, he heard a faint sound, like the rustling of fabric. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. Slowly, he turned the corner and came face to face with a sight that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A tall, slender alien stood before him, her body covered in a fine, silvery fur that glimmered in the dim light. Her eyes were large and luminous, filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. In her arms, she cradled a small, fragile-looking child, a child that shared her features but was even more delicate, with wide, curious eyes that stared at Elias with a mixture of wonder and terror. The alien mother hissed, baring sharp, needle-like teeth. She stepped back, clutching her child protectively. Elias raised his hands in a gesture of peace, his heart racing. He had studied countless alien species, but this one was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Her body language was clear. She saw him as a threat. "Please," Elias said softly, his voice trembling. "I mean you no harm." The alien mother tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as if trying to understand his words. She took another step back, her body tense and ready to flee. Elias realized that she didn't understand him, not his words at least, but perhaps she could understand his intentions. He slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a nutrient bar, one of the few rations he had left. He held it out to her, his hand steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. The alien mother stared at the bar, her nostrils flaring as she sniffed the air. She hesitated, then took a cautious step forward, her eyes never leaving his. Elias placed the bar on the ground and stepped back, giving her space. The alien mother glanced at him, then at the bar, before quickly snatching it up. She examined it carefully, then broke off a small piece and offered it to her child. The child nibbled on it tentatively, its eyes widening in surprise. The alien mother watched her child closely, her expression softening for the first time. Elias felt a pang of sympathy. This alien, this mother, was clearly desperate. She had been stranded on this barren planet, her ship destroyed, with no way to protect her child. And now, she was faced with a creature she had every reason to fear. A human, a species known throughout the galaxy for its insatiable appetite and ruthless nature. But Elias was different. He had dedicated his life to understanding and preserving alien life, not exploiting it. He knew that he had to earn her trust, no matter how long it took. Over the next few days, Elias returned to the crash site, bringing food, water, and medical supplies. The alien mother, whom he had come to think of as Selene, remained wary of him, but she no longer hissed or bared her teeth when he approached. Her child, a curious and playful little creature, was less cautious. It would often toddle over to Elias, its tiny hands reaching out to touch his suit or his face. Selene would always pull the child back, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and protectiveness. Elias tried to communicate with Selene, using gestures and simple words, but it was slow going. She seemed to understand some of what he was saying, but her responses were limited to nods, shakes of her head, and the occasional soft chirp. Despite the language barrier, Elias could sense that she was beginning to trust him, just a little. One day, as Elias was repairing a damaged section of the alien ship, he noticed something strange. Selene was watching him intently, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something he couldn't quite place. She approached him slowly, her movements graceful and deliberate. She reached out and touched his arm, her fingers brushing against the fabric of his suit. Elias froze, his heart pounding. He had no idea what she was doing, but he didn't dare move. Selene's touch was gentle, almost tender, as if she were trying to understand him in a way that went beyond words. She leaned in closer, her breath warm against his face, and for a moment, Elias thought she might kiss him. But then she pulled back, her eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful expression. She turned away and returned to her child, leaving Elias confused and unsettled. That night, as Elias lay in his bunk aboard the Eclipse, he couldn't stop thinking about Selene. There was something about her, something that drew him to her in a way he couldn't explain. He knew that he had to help her, no matter the cost. The next morning, Elias returned to the crash site with a plan. He had spent the night modifying his shuttle to accommodate Selene and her child. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to get them off the planet and to a safe location. When he arrived, he found Selene waiting for him, her child cradled in her arms. She looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear, as if she knew what he was about to propose. Elias gestured to the shuttle, then to Selene and her child. "Come with me," he said softly. "I can take you somewhere safe." Selene hesitated, her eyes darting between Elias and the shuttle. She glanced down at her child, who was looking up at her with wide, trusting eyes. Finally, she nodded, her decision made. Elias helped Selene and her child into the shuttle, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. He knew that he was taking a risk, that he was breaking countless regulations by bringing aliens aboard his ship. But he didn't care. He couldn't leave them here to die. As the shuttle lifted off, Selene clutched her child tightly, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Elias reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude, and for the first time, she smiled. Back aboard the Eclipse, Elias worked tirelessly to make Selene and her child comfortable. He converted one of the storage rooms into a makeshift living quarters, filling it with blankets, food, and toys for the child. Selene watched him with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude, her earlier fear slowly fading away. Over the next few weeks, Elias and Selene grew closer. They still couldn't communicate with words, but they found other ways to connect, through gestures, expressions, and the occasional touch. Selene's child, whom Elias had come to think of as Luna, was a constant source of joy and laughter. The little alien was curious and playful, always eager to explore the ship and interact with Elias. But their newfound peace was short-lived. One day, as Elias was working in the lab, Aegis alerted him to an incoming transmission. It was from a nearby human outpost, and the message was clear. They had detected the presence of aliens aboard the Eclipse and were sending a team to investigate. Elias's heart sank. He knew what this meant. The human authorities would see Selene and Luna as a threat, or worse, as specimens to be studied and dissected. He couldn't let that happen. He rushed to Selene's quarters, his mind racing. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with concern. Elias took a deep breath and tried to explain the situation, using gestures and simple words. Selene's eyes widened in fear, and she clutched Luna tightly. Elias knew that he had to act quickly. He led Selene and Luna to the shuttle bay, his heart pounding with fear and determination. He helped them into the shuttle, his hands trembling as he activated the launch sequence. "Go," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "Find a safe place. I'll hold them off as long as I can." Selene looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers brushing against his skin. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, their unspoken bond stronger than any language. Then, with a final nod, Selene activated the shuttle and launched it into space. Elias watched as it disappeared into the stars, his heart heavy with both sorrow and hope. The human authorities arrived shortly after, their ships bristling with weapons and scanners. They boarded the Eclipse, their faces hard and unyielding. Elias stood his ground, his mind racing as he tried to come up with a plausible explanation. But it didn't matter. They knew he had been harboring aliens, and they were determined to find out why. Elias was taken into custody, his ship impounded and his research confiscated. He was interrogated for days, his captors demanding to know where the aliens had gone. But Elias refused to talk. He knew that he had done the right thing, and he would not betray Selene and Luna. In the end, Elias was sentenced to life imprisonment for his crimes. But as he sat in his cell, staring out at the stars, he felt no regret. He had saved 2 lives, 2 precious, innocent lives, and that was worth any price. Far away, in a distant corner of the galaxy, Selene and Luna found a new home. It was a peaceful planet, filled with lush forests and sparkling rivers. Selene often thought of Elias, her heart filled with gratitude and sorrow. She knew that she would never see him again, but she would never forget him. And as she watched Luna play in the sunlight, Selene knew that she had been given a second chance. A chance to live, to love, and to protect her child. Thanks to the kindness of a human, she had found redemption.